Welcome back to Finding Your Frequency on the Daily News Network. I'm Brian Sexton, thrilled to be joined again by Dr. Josh Wilkerson from Restoring Mathematics, who has a huge summer project that you're engaged in. Give us a preview, Josh, of your event this summer.
So Restoring Mathematics is going to be hosting an event called the Restoring Mathematics Roundtable in Austin, Texas, where we're inviting educators interested in classical education, mathematics specifically, to come and join us for some fellowship, some thought-provoking conversations, and hopefully some practical advice that they can take with them back to their classrooms. We have over 50 educators signed up, so space is starting to shrink. Go to restoringmathematics.com when you can find out more information there.
Restoringmathematics.com. Perfect. And let's welcome our special guest. From New St. Andrews College in Moscow, Idaho, we bring in Mitch Stokes. Mitch, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you for joining the conversation.
All right. Mitch, thanks for your time today. So I want to start off with how I got to know you, which was through your book, Calculus for Everyone, which is a highly recommended book for any teachers out there. But let's just start with a title. If you talk to the person on the street, I don't know if they would agree with the thesis that calculus is indeed for everyone. So I will turn it over to you to kind of make the case of how can it be for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So one of the things is this kind of goes back to a more bigger pedagogical view on mathematics. So one of the things, it's important to step back and look at the big picture. A lot of times we don't do that when it comes to mathematics. We're so used to focusing on doing the problems and all the detailed homework and that sort of thing. And we never actually step back and look at not just the context in which the mathematics was invented or why we needed it, but also how, even as it is now, how it fits into this big picture. What's the overview of that kind of whatever the actual topic is. And in this case with calculus, it's really important to step back, look at not just the calculus itself, look at how it's embedded in the history of the West. Look, there's a philosophical, historical element to it, going all the way back to Plato, which we can talk about in a moment. But one of the things is just looking at calculus per se is really there's probably four basic ideas, main ideas when it comes to calculus. And a lot of times those get lost in all of the weeds, and we don't see the forest, we see a lot of the trees. But there's maybe these four topics, limits, derivatives, integrals, and then how all of that's integrated into with the fundamental theorem of calculus. And so that's what that was so helpful for me actually learning it. My background, my first career was as an engineer. I went through all the math, or a lot of the math, and going back after the fact, after I'd actually gotten into philosophy and looking at some of those issues, seeing the big picture of calculus would have really been helpful as this foundation to lay before I went into, say, some of the more detailed and higher calculus courses. And so looking at those, so you can take, if you think of those four basic ideas, or those main ideas, as kind of tools that you can work on different functions, let's say. So you can apply those to different functions. And oftentimes anybody who's had calculus will see that you can often get bogged down in looking at all of the details and the idiosyncratic ways to apply those tools to particular functions, like a trig function or logarithm, whatever it is. But if you step back and go, okay, let's just focus on very easy functions and learn those main concepts inside and out without going into some of the idiosyncratic details for all the different personalities that the various functions have. You can just do this with polynomials. So in this case, what I've done is we go through all of the basics of calculus using just polynomials. So y equals x squared, for example. I mean, that's a very simple one, but anyone who has algebra, and even algebra 1 background, can handle that. And so by focusing on the polynomials and those just particular functions, you can start seeing what are the essentials of calculus. And it turns out that the basics are readily understandable, and there's this really high yield. They're fascinating too, and if you can focus on those concepts without getting lost in the weeds, or before you move on to some of the crazier, more difficult functions, it makes a world of difference. And so in what's ironic is that in math pedagogy, we've been tricked to think that we have to do everything at once. We kind of have this end result, this ideal, okay, we want these kids to be able to be engineers or whatever it is. And so we think, well, they're going to need this, they're going to need this kind of function, they're going to need to do that. We can't leave that out. And there's a place for that, and there's a place for the rigor and the high-tech stuff, but that's not where you start. And I know even for people who are very, very good at mathematics, having this kind of foundation laid before they go on to some of the details, I can't tell you how many engineers and scientists I've talked to, and I've said, hey, this is, they hear about it, and they say, I wish I had had that. So it's not just like calculus for dummies. It really is just calculus for everyone. Now you can continue to go on if you're going to be an engineer or someone in the STEM disciplines and definitely pick up those other things. But it'll be a lot easier once you understand the basics. And again, it's not watered down or anything like that. It really is actual real calculus, unadulterated, so to speak.
Yeah, I know that our school uses the book, and our students have greatly enjoyed it, and our teachers have enjoyed teaching it. And so the point you make about kind of showing the big picture, the history of calculus, the story of calculus, and going back further to talk about more even ancient Greece, not just mathematicians but philosophers, and how that influenced the growth of calculus. In the classical schools, classical liberal arts movement, like we talk about the liberal arts, and kind of 4 of those liberal arts are math-based. You often call that the quadrivium in terms of number, geometry, astronomy, and music. And so how would you say like classical schools today should really be thinking about those ancient concepts of the quadrivium in the modern world in which we live?
Yeah, good. That's really important, and calculus plays into that actually very well. You can see Newton's invention of the calculus and what it was used for, and kind of what the idea was behind it. You can trace that all the way back to Plato in the Republic, when he introduces basically this idea of how to improve the soul in this rational way in order to train philosophers to be these leaders. So it's interesting, the quadrivium is introduced in the Republic as a way to train up philosophers. And that sounds really bizarre that math would be something that anyone would think could do that. And that's because it's part of this worldview that Plato had, and therefore the West has, because I mean, you think about you probably heard that Plato is philosophy is but a footnote to Plato, the history of philosophy, and there's something to that. And Plato got this worldview, this kind of mathematical view for how to train the soul and educate humans properly for full flourishing, he got that from the Pythagoreans, which is even stranger. So Plato, being this card-carrying Pythagorean, is also something that's usually surprising. So we have to look at the worldview behind the quadrivium, for one thing, and some of the things that we can learn from that. We don't need to take the quadrivium straight no chaser when it comes to like those 4 disciplines, but there's a lot that we can learn from that. After all, mathematics is a lot richer now. Certainly mathematics in its application to the cosmos is a lot richer. And so we have to take that into account. We don't want to go all the way back and just stay there in the ancient world. We've learned a lot, but there's this worldview of Plato that is basically, look, the cosmos is rational, it's rationally ordered by a divine designer according to these mathematical principles. And for us to fully flourish, we need to he would say, our souls need to kind of mirror the cosmos in this rational, beautiful, mathematical way. And you can see that throughout his philosophy, which is often, again, it's surprising for people to think that mathematics is so embedded into the history of philosophy. And that's a fascinating topic in and of itself. So this seeing what Plato was doing and saying, okay, that's true. Some of those main themes that he had, this rational, mathematical, harmonious cosmos that was part of a divine design, is something that we need to take from the quadrivium. And it's probably the main thing is that it shows already that science and the humanities are baked in to the liberal arts. I mean, we don't have to make that up. Right now we have this dichotomy or this separation, these 2 kind of cultures, as C.P. Snow would put it, where the people in the sciences and the people in the humanities, they just can't even talk to one another. We have this notion of siloing in the academy that's even K through 12, that is really, I think, harmful and needs to be addressed. So that's one of the things that we're doing, we should be thinking about when it comes to the quadrivium. And part of one of the things I should point out too is this notion of harmony or music that he has. I mean, that seems like that's just thrown in there out of left field. Like, why is that even part of mathematics? Well, again, the quadrivium is mathematics and how it's applied to the cosmos. This assumption that the cosmos is mathematical and beautiful. And what we've learned now, and this is really fascinating too, is the contemporary physics says that really all the fundamental particles are ultimately these fluctuations of fields or waves, and you have this kind of modern contemporary version of the music of the spheres, which goes back to Pythagoreans and Plato. So even Heisenberg, Werner Heisenberg, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, uncertainty principle guy, he says, contemporary physics has decided in favor of Plato. And Heisenberg's in the beginning of the 19th, he's 20th century. Now it's more and more playing out in terms of this mathematical harmony and music of the spheres. And even when it comes to a fundamental theory of everything in physics, you have string theory as one of the candidates. Well, string theory is just these vibrating strings that make up all of these particles, kind of like this symphony. And Plato would be ecstatic if he saw what was going on now. So we have to, and part of doing this for like a K through 12 kind of education is getting students to see, like, say, Euclid's Elements, calculus, how all of those are foundational to understanding even our contemporary cosmos. It's not just a historical thing. So you really have these bookends of Pythagoreans discovering the mathematical harmonies that you can characterize musical intervals with numbers, to today, where you have now the candidate theory for everything is string theory. I mean, talk about a coincidence. It's just a fascinating story, and I think this goes back to something you've said recently: is we need to regain that sort of storytelling when it comes to mathematics, and not just storytelling in the sense that you have these characters, and which you do, and certainly in terms of history, but also stepping back and seeing the big picture and seeing how coherent it is. And the universe is remarkably user-friendly, and philosophers and theologians, Christians, picked up on this in the Middle Ages when they emphasized the quadrivium so much. This was a big deal. I mean, and that's one of the things that we need to capture. And I think that and again, it's natural. It's built into the liberal arts and the history of the West, and it's necessary. We're just not going to be able to see, we're not going to be able to understand contemporary culture unless we do that.
Mitch Stokes from New St. Andrews College in Moscow, Idaho. Thanks so much for joining us. You've made me want to pick up my copy of The Republic.
My job is done.
And Dr. Josh Wilkerson, great to see you as always. Don't forget, Restoring Mathematics, a big conference this summer. Go to their website and check it out. Until next time, thanks for joining us here on the Daily News Network for Finding Your Frequency.